Hello and welcome to the overview lecture for week 1. The purpose of this overview is to provide you with a basic introduction to the major topics and questions that will be covered in this week's reading. The focus for this week will be the Reconstruction era. Reconstruction is a name given to the 12 years following the end of the Civil War, from 1865 to 1877. The Civil War, which had lasted from 1861 to 1865, had been devastating for the nation, with more than 600,000 Americans killed. The end of the war brought joy to some, but sadness to others, and it also created several new challenges for the nation. For example, how would the southern states be brought back into the Union? What would happen to all of the former slaves? Would they be given land and equal rights? Would Southerners be punished for their actions? These kinds of questions were the focus of the Reconstruction period. For blacks in the South, Reconstruction was initially a period of great hope as they took advantage of their new freedom to do things they had never been able to do before, such as choose their own last names. For many Southern whites, the early Reconstruction years were ones of fear and anxiety as they struggled to come to terms with the destruction of their former way of life. Among Northern politicians, there was significant division as to what direction Reconstruction should take. There was disagreement as to how harsh or lenient the government should act toward the southern states, as well as how much responsibility the government should take for ensuring equal rights for the freed people. There was significant conflict between President Johnson and Congress over which would control the Reconstruction process. Eventually, Congress gained control of Reconstruction and established a plan to admit the former Confederate states into the Union. They also made some efforts to bring about the equality of blacks, for example, through the passage of the 14th and the 15th Amendments. However, these actions were resented by most Southern whites who hoped to reestablish their dominant position in society. Racial violence continued to be common during this period, and many freed blacks came to find that the hopes that they initially had for their freedom were not being met. By the mid-1870s, Northern commitment to Reconstruction was waning as other issues, such as the growing economic depression, came to be seen as more important. With the election of President Hayes in 1877, Reconstruction came to an end. Historians have been divided on how Reconstruction should be viewed. Some have been inclined to view Reconstruction as a failure, while others have argued that Reconstruction should be viewed, at least in part, as a success. One part of your assignment for this week will have you developing your own argument as to how this period should be viewed. After you complete the reading, you should be able to answer the following questions. What were the major challenges, political, social, and economic, facing the nation after the end of the Civil War? What were the major differences between the President's plans for Reconstruction and the Congressional plan for Reconstruction? What was the eventual outcome of the conflict between the two sides? How should the Republican-dominated Southern state governments of the Reconstruction period be characterized? What were the accomplishments and failures of these governments, and how did the Democrats regain power? How and why did Reconstruction come to an end? What was the Reconstruction experience like for blacks in the South? Significant terms that you should recognize after reading include Presidential Reconstruction, Congressional Reconstruction, Freedmen's Bureau, sharecropping, 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment.
Created using Powtoon.